So years ago, I went with my then husband to Church of Christ down in this, I don't know, it's around Folsom area. No, not Folsom area, Folsom Boulevard. And I remember we went to Mother's Day service, and it was like, mothers are the most wonderful people on the earth, and you know, the pastor was a very exuberant black man. And he, you know, they brought out roses, and they, you know, and it was like, you know, in prison, you know, moms get all the Mother's Day cards, and dads don't get any Mother's Day cards. You know, and then Dad's Father's Day would come around, and it would be all about the deadbeat dads that don't do their job. So, in light of all that, I'm going to sort of, you know, put a little spin on Mother's Day, because I think that, you know, we don't, just being female doesn't make us perfect. We have. So there's kind of like, you know, right now being a woman is sort of like a right to say whatever you want, to do whatever you want. But I guess I want to sort of question that. Okay, so I grew up in the 70s. I grew up in South America, and my mom was American. She was an American lady, and you know, I grew up in a very extremely, I would say the environment that I grew up in was extremely conservative, extremely, you know, there's a lot of order in society. There's a lot of hierarchies, and you know, the family was very strong. There was, you know, high class and middle class and low class, and all of these positions were very, you know, they existed in a very powerful way. And I actually grew up really feeling very comfortable, you know, like I knew who I was, I knew what my place was, and I felt some sense of satisfaction. Now, my mom, she grew up in I guess she was in college in the 1960s, and she married a very wonderful man. You know, he was very wealthy, but she was extremely unhappy, and I would actually put a little bit of blame on that. Not to say that, you know, things in her family were great, because things in her family were not that great, but I would put that somewhat in this feeling that she had of constant dissatisfaction in her position as a mom. Like, she grew up being told, you know, in the 70s that, you know, women had to get a job, and women had to, I'm not saying women should not get a job, okay? I'm not saying like you should, I'm not against women getting work. But for whatever reason, like she had this circumstances where she really didn't need to get work. She could do whatever she wanted to do. She had basically everything laid out at her feet, but she was always dissatisfied. And she was very resentful about the fact that she had children and had to take care of them. She was always like, one of these days I'm going to walk out of this house. And you know, especially when we broke something, or, you know, because we were pretty wild, you know. So she didn't really appreciate her position as a mom. Like, she felt a sense of that because she hadn't finished college and she hadn't found herself, that just being a mother was insufficient. You know, that was insufficient. And we felt that. We felt that so profoundly. We felt like, what's wrong with mom? Why does she hate us? You know, we would have meetings like, what happened to mom? What's wrong with mom? And so eventually, you know, when I was about 14 years old, she was like, we're going to America where real people live, you know, where there's a real, you know, people are educated, and, you know, we're sick of this third world country stuff where people don't even, you know, run the red lights, and people don't cross the pedestrian path lights, and there's you know, there's no milk in the store. You know, we're going to go to a civilized country, right? Sorry. So we came to America, and then my mom basically went to college to get an education. She wanted to be but my mom was like even more unhappy once we came to the United States. She became even more depressed and whatever. She really, really, really struggled with her identity as a woman and as a mom, you know. And, you know, I guess that's kind of like the other side of women's power, and the other side of feminism is this failure to really understand what the identity and value of femininity and womanhood really is. And in a way, a sort of, almost kind of like a rebellion against, you know, we're not going to be women, we're not going to be moms, you know. Now you look at movies and like women never, ever, ever, ever cook in a movie. Have you noticed, has anyone noticed that? Like television shows, like their dad's always cooking, right? And the woman's like, I'm back from work, honey. You know? I don't know if you've noticed that. I have noticed that. Like in recent television shows, you will never see the woman cooking. It's like a rebelling against, you know, cooking, right? I can relate to that. Finding someone who can cook for you. All right, so the question is, you know, in this time where we see like almost an aggressive and violent sort of feminism that's like masculinity is toxic, right? Toxic masculinity. Where feminists basically are like, we hate masculinity as long as it's not in women. Like they love masculine women, but they despise masculine men, right? So it's really a time of great transition, right? In the 1990s, I went to a speech by Reverend Moon, and I remember at that speech, he said, it was I think the Day of All Things, 1991, I don't remember. I remember him clearly saying, it is the age of women is coming. You know, the age of women is coming, and I am doing everything I can to liberate the hearts of women. And I was like, oh, wonderful, yay, you know. But, you know, if I, you know, in the way things have happened in the past, you know, 30 or 40 years, one has to kind of look back and think, well, what if it was the case that, in a sense, women had had all the power throughout history? You know, what if women had been in charge of everything, and everything would have been women, 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 women? Because women always look back and they're like, look at history, you know, all these terrible things happened and men were in charge, you know, men suck. And I'm like, well, what if it had been women in charge? Like, would it have been better? You know, would women have never done anything wrong? Never had wars between nations? Never had slavery? You know, are women just inherently superior to men on account that they have been victims? I would argue not. Like, I would argue that women can actually be just as awful and as evil as a man can be, and they can also be just as good as men can be. So I would like to argue that actually inherent goodness doesn't come from whether we are victims or we're in a position of power, right? You can have people that are in a position of power who do great good, and you have to have people who are in a position of victims who aren't necessarily good. Like you put them, okay, well you're a victim, so I'm gonna put you in power, and that doesn't mean that they're actually inherently gonna be good, right? We look at, like for example, I don't know, I'm not like a real historian, but I know a little bit. Just, you know, in Haiti there was a huge revolution, and basically the slaves killed all the white people. They like murdered children, women, everything, right? And so they're like, yeah, no slavery, yay, and great, no slavery, right? But right now, Haiti is like one of the poorest countries in the world. Like I spent some time in Haiti. They actually like cut all the trees down. They're like have no trees because they just like oh, we need wood, chop off the. Oh no, no one ever thought of replanting a tree. So just because we're in a position of victim or we're not in a position of power doesn't make it doesn't necessarily the next step that, oh well, if you remove the position of power and you put a victim in a position of power, that they're going to be good leaders, right? So I think really, if this is really the time of women, like this is a time where women we actually have to be really introspective. Like, we have to really be like, whoa, you know, what is our value? And what is it, what is the value, what is femininity, what is motherhood, what is our position, and like, are we always good at it, you know? Are we always good at it? Because actually, you know, in a way, for example, if you have a building, right, and the building is made out of a bunch of bricks, right, and like, let's say you're one of the bricks, and you're like, hey, you know, I don't want to be a brick. Like, brick's such a boring thing to be. Like, all you do is just stay in this, like, you're square. It's not very exciting. Like, I want to be a vase. I want to be a sculpture, you know. So you're like, you know, get out of your wall and go try to be something else, right? Something that you're not, right? And then, like, the building is like a little shake of the earthquake, and the building comes down, right? So, in a way, like, if we understand ourselves to be created beings, right? If we truly have been created by omnipotent, all-knowing, and all-loving God, right? That means that we actually have an inherent purpose. Like, as myself, as an individual, as your, or as a type of person, or as a man, or as a woman, or as a child, or as a parent, or as a grandparent, or as, you know, whatever it is that we have been created as, we have an inherent value, an inherent purpose for our creation. And we can try to deny that inherent value. We can be like, I don't want to be that brick, you know, I don't want to be a woman, you know, I don't want to be a man, I don't want to be a child, I don't want to be a wife, I don't want to be a dad, I don't want to be all these things. But so long as we don't, like, take our proper order, we don't accept the purpose of our creation, and I'm talking about natural order, I'm not talking about, like, you should be this, you know. I'm talking about why we were originally created by God. We were always going to feel anxiety, you know, within ourselves. We're always going to feel dissatisfaction, you know. So it's hard to really understand, like, what our value really is. You know, it's easy to say, like, oh, understand your value, understand your purpose, but we have been living throughout in a history where we haven't really understood our value, we haven't really understood our position, we haven't really understood our purpose. We've kind of, like, tried to work things out, you know, we've made mistakes along the way, so we don't really know. So, in a way, like, asking the question, like, what is my position? What is my value? Like, well, how should things be? You know, is a valuable question. It's a valuable question. In fact, I think that if we don't ask that question about ourselves, we're just probably, you know, either we're in the wrong lane, you know. It's like if we look at that song talked about, you know, the order. There's order in the universe, right? Planets kind of all exist, they all work, they all kind of, the planets go around the sun, they all kind of spin in their own direction, they all have gravity, they all are interdependent. It exists as a whole, right? It's not like, I'm a planet and I'll go wherever I want to, you know? So we're living in a society where basically, most people are like, I'm a planet and I'm going where I want to, and I'm going to be a star if I want to, even though I'm just dust, you know? So in society, we have tremendous disorder, right? The planets are just flying around everywhere, you know, crashing into each other, right? In fact, even if you're like, okay, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to be doing, like, you never know when you're going to get hit by some planet that's like, you know, coming after you. Or just flying out of control, right? So we are kind of being hit by things around us. So in a way, it's very hard. It's very hard. You know, we can be like, oh, society, you know, society has all kinds of problems, blah blah blah, you know. So how do we deal with that? You know, how do we deal with the fact that things are out of order, things are in chaos, and we don't quite know how to put them back together? In fact, half the time we don't know how to put ourselves back together, right? Half the time we don't know what's wrong with me. What's wrong with me? So I would state, brilliant as I am, that actually asking the question is step one. Acknowledging the problem is actually an accomplishment. It's actually, it's not like, oh my gosh, everything's out of control, despair, which is kind of, honestly, half the time I feel that way, So I'm not going to say, like, don't despair, because that would sort of be like saying, like, don't eat food, We are all going to feel a certain amount of despair. We're all going to be disappointed when we see things that are not right. We're all going to be like, oh my God, I'm going not only am I in the wrong lane, I'm on the wrong highway, Or my car has broken down. It's like I'm on the side of the road. I can't even move. So recognizing that things are out of place or out of control, or that we have problems within ourselves, or suddenly waking up and being like, oh my God, I have a lot of fear. I didn't know that. I've lived for 50 years and I didn't realize that I have fear. I'm like, oh, drown! So in a sense, acknowledging that things are not the way that they should be is an accomplishment, right? Is step one. Step one, And in fact, I would argue, and even if we begin by acknowledging, things are not quite right, Step one, accomplishment, ding, check, Instead of like despair. Another and then it's like, well, what can I do from here? Let us change the world, right? It's all wrong. Hate everyone, We hate the system. So still, that doesn't really make any difference, right? Even if you are a victim, things have gone wrong in your life on account of everyone else making mistakes. Really, once you recognize that, it still doesn't help to try to blame anyone else. Because in a sense, in my personal experience, it doesn't solve the problem. So even if it would be nice to blame other people, and even if you are righteously indignant, and even if all kinds of things are owed to you, just because you ask for them back, just because you demand what would reparations, doesn't mean you're going to get them. And if you don't get them, then what do? Do you remain as a constant victim, constantly angry, constantly depressed? So in a sense, from the point of view of just functionality, taking responsibility for whatever situation we're in, regardless of whether it's someone else's fault or our own fault, is kind of the only thing that the only recourse that we actually really have, right? And then this next step is to take one small step, right? I mean, like, if you're like, wow, I should be over there in that system of planets. Like, I'm not supposed to be here. And you're like, okay, here we go. The course of getting from where you're actually at to where you realize you should be may be such a long course that you may want to consider just taking one small step, right? One small doable step. Because or else you're going to be like, all right, I'm going to go, it's like my daughter's a gymnast, or they were gymnasts. And very interestingly enough, in gymnastics, what they do is they work like one skill for a long time. Even if that skill is like, I want you to hold your position like this. I want you to hold your position like this. And then once they really learn that skill, they move them to the next skill, right? So they're not like, okay, well, we want you to do a double backflip on the beam. Try that, okay? It doesn't work that way. They start, like, okay, first you have to learn how to do a back roll on the floor, and then we want you to do a back handspring on the floor. Then I want you to learn how to do a back tuck on the floor. And then, so you work incrementally. So you have to, they have these two bars, right? And you have to jump off of one bar and climb onto the other bar. If the other bar is so far away that you're not going to reach it, right? You'll be like, I have courage, I can do this, I'm going to jump, and you're going to fall on your face, right? So sometimes lowering the bar is a good idea, Like sometimes you're like, aim high, have big goals, blah, blah, blah. It's good to aim high, it's good to aim goal, it's good to know where you're going, but it's also important to lower the bar where you can actually reach it, because what's the point of taking a step when you know that you're going to fail, right? Because you're just going to discourage yourself. So recognizing our faults, recognizing that maybe we don't quite really understand our value, maybe recognizing that things aren't perfect in our life, or that there's great places to make improvement, can be really overwhelming. You know, so sometimes I think we don't want to ask the question, like, what's wrong? Or we don't want to face reality. Or sometimes the reality is really painful to face, you know. Our own reality is painful to face, you know, emotionally, or financially, or physically, or whatever. It's hard to face our reality because the problems may seem unsolvable. You know, if we look at the situation of society right now, it's overwhelming, you know. So how do we deal with it? I would like to, I think, you know, in a way, like asking, who am I? You know, who am I and what is my value is like kind of step one, you know, step one. And the thing is, it's confusing because there's no like, you are Joe. Oh, I'm Joe, you know, it's not that simple. Like the answer isn't simple. It's not a simple answer. And so I think kind of putting ourselves in a position of sort of discomfort and questioning things can be scary for a lot of people. And I know some people, they get so overwhelmed that they never ask the question. Or, so in a way, I feel like if we can kind of see things from a different perspective and be like, oh, you know, okay, well, I have problems, that's like okay, like everyone has problems. And, you know, maybe I'm not a perfect person and I have all these issues, but not looking at ourselves and not facing ourselves just probably means we're going to make the same mistake over and over and over and over again. So sometimes even to make the smallest change, to take like the smallest step, huge amount of effort, you know? Like just being like, oh, you know, I'm going to look in this direction. Maybe I should be going that way. That can sometimes be so much internal effort as a human being, right? To be like, maybe I shouldn't be going that way. Maybe I should be going, like, let's look at the map, you know? That's like a big step, you know? And acknowledging that step, you know, suddenly being like, oh my God, we've been driving in the wrong direction all this time. No, you know, like sometimes we don't want to look because we don't want to be like, wow, you know, for 20 years I've been actually driving in the wrong direction. You're like, whoa, that's just too hard to face. I don't want to do it. I'm not even going to look at the map, you know? So if we look at the map and then like, eventually we're going to be faced with our reality. At some point or another, we're going to be faced with reality, whether we like it or not, you know? But is that really such a bad thing? It's not a bad thing if we take one step at a time. Like take every victory. Now Reverend Moon was like the champion of like claiming victories. You know, there's stories of, you know, when everything would go wrong, he'd be like, yes! We did it! You know, one person showed up to our 2,000 people rally. Excellent! You know, so sometimes I think we have to do that personally. We have to take the smallest victories. You know, and like sometimes even, for example, let's say you're like a raging alcoholic. Not that any of you guys are. Not that any of you guys have you know, addiction issues, right? We all have some kind of addiction, right? We're all addicted to something. Whether it's like watching TV or like eating cookies, like we all have something that we struggle with, right? So sometimes sometimes not doing something is an accomplishment, right? Like, all right, I want to go into the refrigerator and eat that entire cheesecake. That's what I want to do right now. That's kind of the sort of problem I would have. I'm sure that some of you have other issues. You just convey, like, some people will be like, I have $200 in my pocket, I'm gonna go spend it right now. I'm gonna go buy stuff, you know, or I don't know what your addiction is, or what your shortcoming is, or how you kind of like to, you know, do things that you know you really shouldn't do. So sometimes like just being like, you know, that's what I want to do right now. So I'm actually going to go into my room and I'm going to sleep, you know, so that I don't do what I really want to do right now, you know. And sometimes not doing something is actually an accomplishment, right? You're like, I didn't go and do that stupid thing. Like, I didn't do that. Check, you know, great job. So, back to women. So the question is, like, in this world where everything's like out of, planets are flying in all directions, it's actually, like, staying in our lane is like the counterculture, I'm gonna actually stay in the place that I'm supposed to stay. Like, ooh, unheard of. And actually, staying in your lane is such a hard thing to do, Staying, like if today I'm supposed to do my essay for my school, right? That's my lane, right? I'm supposed to do my homework. If you're a student, you have to do your homework, right? That's your lane, right? You're not supposed to be like on a radio host or anything like that. You're supposed to actually get your homework done. That's your lane, right? Like, staying in your lane can sometimes be really hard for some people that are not type A. So my daughter, who's actually really type A, she's like, I do everything I'm supposed to do. What's wrong with you guys? So, like, knowing, like, if you have a responsibility, right? Even if that responsibility may not seem that difficult for another person, it might be really hard for you, And staying in that lane is a huge accomplishment, Our little microcosm that we live in, my little world is basically all that I have, Regardless of what's happening in the world, all I have is my microcosm. Like the 4 walls in my head, 4 walls around my house, that's my world, that's my microcosm. And the only thing that I can really influence is how I act within the realm of my world, right? So my microcosm is kind of, for me, has the value of the entire universe, right? So we have to be like, oh, my microcosm is important, I am actually really, in the realm of everything that's going on in the world, the only thing that I can really make a difference in is here in my microcosm. So that one step that we take, in our world is of vast, huge value, It has repercussions beyond ourselves. Even if we think, oh, staying in my lane is really boring, like 55 miles an hour, everyone's like flying by, I'm like, staying in my lane, like all I want to do is get out of my lane. That's all I want to do, But it's like, this is my lane. And if you stay in your lane, it's like those repercussions to society can be so extraordinary. We don't even realize it, right? Like, staying in my lane for me has been like not to abandon my position as a parent, as a mom. Like, that has been really hard for me. Like, I have wanted to flee. Confessions. I have wanted to run away. Actually, I'll tell you one story. I used to live off of Bradshaw, and I was having a lot of problems with my husband at that time. And like, it was actually after church. I remember that really clearly. Like, Joshua Cotter gave this really inspirational thing, and I was like, oh, my life sucks. And I was like, I got in my car, I dropped off my kids when I got home, and I drove into the hills. Like, I drove up, and I was like, I'm gonna keep going. I don't know where I'm going, I'm just gonna keep going. Like, I'm never coming back. Like, I don't wanna come back, And I remember after a while, I was like, oh, I don't really know where to go, I was just driving up the hill. Like, I was like, oh, okay. So I drove down the hill, and I remember, like, I parked right outside that, there's like that place where they do carts, they have race carts. And I was parked in that parking lot. It was already nighttime. I had spent the whole day just like, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? And I remember sitting in that car and being like, I don't want to go home. I never want to go home. And I remember, like, just, it was such a battle for me to drive from that parking lot home. Sorry. And I remember Jesus was like, and I have like a complicated relationship with Jesus as a Jew. I was like, Jesus, do you forgive me? Like, no. But I remember that day, and I knew that it was Jesus, and like Jesus actually spoke to me, and he was like, go home, you know? And I was like, and I just, you know, I drove home. But that was the hardest thing. It was the hardest thing. It wasn't like I was a great mom when I was at home, you know, the house was a mess and stuff, but I didn't leave, you know, I didn't leave. And that was like, that took so much effort, you know, it took so much effort. It was like so hard to do, but I stayed in my lane, and now I can look back and think, oh, just stayed in my lane. Like, my kids are doing great, you know. But at the time, I just, you know, I wanted to get out of my lane. You know, and then yeah. So back to women, and, you know, let us, you know, back to women and restoration and being a victim, which is now like very popular, right? I'm a victim. You know, and myself, you know, I have Jewish ancestors, and, you know, like, why did all these people kill us, and blah, 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 you know, curse them. You know, at one point, like, I had this realization, and that is that, you know, if in order for the kingdom of heaven to come, we all really have to kind of go through a certain amount of introspection and be like, you know what? Yeah, you know, they killed us, they did all these bad things to us, but we killed Jesus, you know, we did kill him, you know. It was a long time ago, but we did that. And if we look at every culture has committed some kind of crime, you know. I mean, even cultures that supposedly are powerless cultures. I mean, if you look at Africa, you know, I mean, Africa was super tribal. They all killed each other. They practiced polygamy. They practiced witchcraft. You know, there are crimes within the African community. And I mean, I grew up also in South America, right? South American people, you know, Mexicans are so mistreated, right? The Aztecs used to like commit, you know, they used to sacrifice humans. We all have to really look back at our own culture and be like, whoa, you know, bad things happen to us, but we also do some bad things, you know? And I think as women, you know, we can be like, oh, men have had all the power, you know, we have to look back at ourselves and be like, women did some bad things too, you know, we've done some bad things, you know, and that's part of growth. That's not part of like, oh, you know, we suck, you know, it's part of recognizing, it's a step to growth, is recognizing our failures, you know, and from the beginning, if the fall is really true, Eve fell twice, Adam fell one time. Eve fell with the archangel and with Adam, 2 times. That's a lot of introspection right there, you know. What about like Cain and Abel? According to Reverend Moon, like part of the reason Cain killed Abel was because Eve, like Eve wasn't a really good mom. Cain killed Abel. You know. So in the story of Jesus, right? So Mary. Part of the reason that Jesus was crucified was because of Mary, because of his mom, right? So we like to be like, moms are so great, mom sacrificed so much, blah, blah, blah. But like, we have to also recognize that as mothers, we not only individually have made mistakes, or our moms have made mistakes, or our ancestors have made mistakes, but on a historical level, women have also, you know, we have caused problems, and we have to recognize that. You know, we have to recognize and you know, take steps in our smaller world to rectify that, you know, to rectify that in our own families, in our own minds, in our prayer, in our relationship with God, like whatever. Even if it's one small thing that we can think of, like, okay, well, this is one thing that I see women did wrong. That this is one thing that I can change in my life. You know, one small little step that I can change in my life. You know, to take that step, to make that small step, is of infinite value, is a historically huge thing, you know? From the point of view of the spirit world, it's like, you know, whoa, like great cheering, because making one small step in the right direction is such an accomplishment, such a huge accomplishment, you know? even if from the outside you can be like, yeah, well today I didn't get drunk like I do every day, you know, I'm like, great, I'm gonna get drunk tomorrow. You know, but that's like, you know, like just trying is like it's just trying, even if you fail, like the fact that you actually tried, like God takes great comfort in effort, you know? Even if you know you're gonna be like, you know what, I'm gonna run into that wall, I'm gonna crash and fall again. Like, there's a certain amount of value in like making that effort, you know? It's like, you know what, the wall's there, I'm never gonna get through, I'm just gonna lay here, you know? Like, you're never actually make it through the wall if you just lay there. Like, at one day, you may actually make it through that wall. You know, you may actually crash through and accomplish something. So it's like, the effort is a value. Our effort is valuable, you know. Even the smallest step is valuable. Recognizing our failures is valuable, you know. Looking in the direction that we should be going is an accomplishment, you know. So questioning ourselves, finding our mistakes, realizing our problems is not just a value for ourselves, but it's also a value for humanity. It's a value for history. It's a value for our children. It's a value for the future, you know. It's a value for your neighbor. Like, we don't know how just the fact that we stay in your lane, just the fact that you stay in your lane, maybe no one knows, right? No one knew that that night was like, for me, was so difficult, right? Nobody knew, right? No one knows how hard it is for you to stay in your lane, right? But that doesn't mean that the value of it has no repercussions, right? There are great repercussions from understanding where we should be and staying there, even though maybe everything around us is in chaos and everyone around us is going, you know, flying in other directions, right? Okay. Where am I now? I think that was kind of like a lot already there. So, don't despair. And even if you do despair, then just despair temporarily. The end. Thank you. Dearest Heavenly Father, we would like to offer our profoundest gratitude to you because of all the people that really stayed in their lane. You are the champion of that. And you are the champion of being unrecognized and forgotten and unappreciated, Heavenly Father. So we just want to offer our respect to you and really ask you to help us become more like you. Heavenly Father, give us the strength to keep trying and to be positive and to make even the smallest, the smallest change in our own lives. And we thank you and we pray together as a community and myself as a Blessed Central family.